In this video, we're looking at UFC 297. I'm going to give you my final pick. So this is going to be lineup construction, strategy, what you need to do to hopefully take down a slate. All of that and more. And as always, you can call me Kunath. Let's make some money this week. We started the week with 12 fights, and at the time of recording this, we still have 12 fights. Now, there's still time for somebody to miss weight. They're in Canada. Someone might get trampled by a moose.
Mom, come outside! There's a fucking moose!
But we're going to work with what we have and look at all 12 fights on this slate from a Draftkings perspective, starting with the value plays. These are plays in 8,000 and below. You're going to need some of them in your lineup this week. This is going to be an interesting set of value plays for a few reasons. There are some fighters down here who I don't think are going to win, but you should consider in your value plays. There are also fighters at 8,000 and below who I do think are going to win, who aren't going to go anywhere near my lineups. The first value play is right here at 8,000, right at the top of that range. It's Dricus du Plessis, the challenger in the main event. He's going to be very popular this week. We actually have him projected to pull more ownership than Strickland, and I understand why. The guy's been on a tear. If you look at some of these scores that he's posted in his run in the UFC, it's been ridiculous. He's averaging almost 110. He's coming off of 114, 119, 126. A lot of that's coming off of his knockdowns, his finishes, his takedowns, and he's also putting a decent amount of volume out there. Now, if you haven't already, watch the predictions video from earlier in the week. That's going to break down the entire card for you and tell you exactly why I lean which way I lean on these fights. I personally think that Strickland wins this fight. Even though I don't think he's going to win, he still needs to be part of my player pool because the price is right, the scoring upside is there, he has 5 rounds to work with, and although he's coming in at high ownership, because he's the other side of the main event, you're still getting leverage off of Strickland. And you're not going to play these guys in the same lineup anyway. So having Dricus du Plessis in your lineup makes a ton of sense. One of the better value plays of the week, and I don't even think he's going to win. Another guy I don't think is going to win, another guy who I think might be done winning fights at the UFC level, is Jimmy Flick. One of the things we touched on in the predictions video is the fact that Jimmy Flick has a lot going for him this week. Well, maybe it's not a lot, but the one big thing he has going for him this week is that he's fighting Malcolm Gordon. You're always going to be in it when you're fighting Malcolm Gordon, so I think that Jimmy Flick is definitely somebody who you should have in value play consideration, because if he wins, it's going to be inside the distance. It's likely going to be with his grappling, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a takedown here as well. That takedown is going to be plus 5 points. If he does get a finish, it won't be in the third round. It'll be before that. So 90 points for round 1, 70 points for round 2. I don't see Jimmy Flick getting crazy ownership just because there are more attractive pieces right around his price point, like Dricus du Plessis, who we just talked about. So you could find a situation where Jimmy Flick, when we go back at the end of the night, ends up being one of the sneakier plays on the slate with that high scoring potential. So somebody you want to consider, somebody that you should have in your player pools, and you can set the exposures and things like that. We'll talk more about that shortly. But if you look at Malcolm Gordon's run in the UFC, he has lost 4 times, he has won twice. Now, in the fights that he's lost, he got finished in the first round, he got submitted in the third round after a grappling heavy pace from Muhammad Mokaev. An injury stops the fight with Bondar. It counts as a TKO finish for him. He scored 102 Draftkings points because it came in the first round. Against Francisco Figueiredo, he only scored 80 points in a decision win, but he was only 7,300. I don't know exactly what slate that was. I don't have the data for that slate, but if that was a slate that had a lot of fights go the distance, then even at 80 points scored, down at 7,300, he was probably optimal that night. And then you have to look at his first 2 fights, back-to-back first-round losses. So I say that to say this. There's a really strong chance that out of his 6 fights in the UFC, one side of that matchup has shown up on the optimal lineup 6 out of 6 times. At worst, you're looking at around 4 to 5 out of those 6 times. So you have to keep that in mind when you're building lineups this week and when you're working with your lineup optimizer. You have a situation where 2 guys who are very low-level flyweights when it comes to UFC caliber talent, let's be real, going to have to stomach rostering one of them at least in your lineups, because the winner of this fight probably shows up on the winning lineup at the end of the night with the way that the scoring could shake out and with the way that these guys are priced. So again, Jimmy Flick, somebody who should be in value play consideration. Sam Patterson might be in the same boat in this fight with Johan Lainez. One of these guys is going down. I think that Sam Patterson has more ways to win this fight. I think he can grapple effectively. I think if they do get to the mat, he's going to have a lot of success with his length, those tools. I like that he's coming up to 170, not being a weight bully. Getting cold cocked will make you rethink some things, so I can understand why he is coming up to 170. Lainez started in the UFC as a lightweight, didn't go his way, came up to welterweight, also didn't go his way. But to me, the performances that Lainez has put together versus the brief performance that we had for Patterson when it comes to just being in the UFC, I give Patterson more of the benefit of the doubt. He got caught by a guy who's super powerful that threw everything into these punches. It was also early, so he was still cold. It was his UFC debut, so there's jitters there, there's nervousness there, I can almost give him a pass. But for Lane S, we've seen him consistently not show up. He barely showed up against Darian Weeks, definitely didn't show up last time out against Mike Malott, and against Gabe Green he showed up for all of 4.5 minutes. So Sam Patterson, with the way that the fight goes, he's got the finishing upside, he can get it done this week. I like him to be in my player pool when it comes to these underdogs. Sam Patterson, great value. Something I want to touch on here, so if you watched the predictions video earlier in the week, you saw me make a case for Marc-Andre Barriault, and yes, I do think that he's going to win because I think it's a good matchup. I'm not touching this guy with a 10-foot pole from a DraftKings perspective, and I'll quickly explain why. Out of all of his time in the UFC, I think he has 11 fights total. You look at this column here, a lot of zeros. You see the one takedown there, you see the one takedown there. Outside of that, he's not securing takedowns, so the wrestling upside's not there. Even if he wanted to take Chris Curtis down, he's not going to be able to do it. When you look at the knockdowns, he has 3 knockdowns in the UFC. Chris Curtis is not somebody who's going to get knocked down all that easily. What I think is going to happen here, both these guys are going to throw a decent amount of strikes. Marc-Andre is going to try to lean on him in the clinch, and that's going to be about it, and we're going to see that for 3 rounds. They're going to go to war. It's going to be a fun fight, but they're only going to throw hands. They're not going to knock each other down. They're not going to take each other down. If anyone's getting knocked down in this fight, it is Marc-Andre Barriault. So if you want to play Chris Curtis in your lineups, fine. I don't hate it. But for this guy, we've seen him put up 81 points in a decision win. We saw him put up 80 points in a decision win. Let's get another decision win just to see, oh, where we ran out of them. Okay. So he's averaging 80.5 DraftKings points in decision wins. On a card like this, I don't think that's going to cut it. So I think that he wins. I like Marc-Andre in this fight, but he's not going to be in my player pool, which is what I was telling you before. We talk about this principle of building lineups on the channel all the time. It's not always about playing guys that you think are going to win. Conversely, sometimes you don't play the guys you think are going to win because of the way that the scoring shakes out. I know in other sports, like NFL, for example, they'll call it game script. Game script is how you think the fights are going to go. So let's call this fight script. How's the fight go? They stand up. It's 15 minutes, just boxing. Nobody's getting takedowns. Nobody's getting knockdowns. The winner of this fight scores 80 DraftKings points. I don't like it. The next value play is in our co-main event spot with Raquel Pennington. Now we have 2 title fights on this card, which makes building lineups a little bit easier than it typically is. When you're building your lineups this week, what I would recommend is start by getting the 2 spaces that you need out of the way, and that's going to be the co-main event and the main event. I like Raquel Pennington to win this fight for the same reasons that I like Sean Strickland to win this fight. I like the output, I like the takedown defense, I like the submission defense, and I think that they're just going to be able to put a pace out there that their opponents aren't going to be able to keep up with in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. So if they can maintain a high pace throughout all 5 rounds with the way that they're priced, they're not 9,000, they're not 9,500. Any score of 100 DraftKings points or better puts them in excellent spots. So I like Raquel Pennington this week. I think she's going to get takedowns here. I think she's going to win the volume game here. I think she's going to rack up control time up against the fence. It just seems like it's her moment. She's paid her dues. She's fought everybody. She's been in the UFC for a long time. She's no spring chicken. She fought in Invicta. She fought people that were high level in Invicta as well. I know, like, people on MMA Twitter, which is the lamest place on the planet, let's be real. I have a Twitter or an X account, whatever you want to call it. Yes, I have one. Do I use it all that much? No, it's just not for me. MMA Twitter is the high school cafeteria of the MMA community. So I see a lot of people saying that this fight is trash and this and that, whatever. The truth of the matter is Raquel Pennington is more deserving of a title shot and wearing that belt than most people, women, men, doesn't matter, on the entire roster. In life, a lot of what you get is what you give, and I think that Raquel Pennington has given so much. So I think that Raquel Pennington wins this fight, scores north of 100 DraftKings points, is at underdog pricing, and shows up on the optimal lineup more often than not. And next we're looking at Arnold Allen, and you might be thinking at this point, hold on, are we just looking at everybody priced at 8,000 and below? It might seem that way so far, but Arnold Allen is the last value play that we're going to look at, because everything south of Arnold Allen, no man's land to me. I think Arnold Allen has a really good chance of not only winning this fight, but finishing this fight as well. When it comes to talent level down here at the price, you're looking at a situation where the people priced around him are not as good of fighters as he is. Sometimes that's just enough to get you there when it comes to building your DraftKings lineups, but he's so much better of a striker than Movsar Evloev. Movsar Evloev was getting exposed in the final round against Mean Hakeem Dawodu not too long ago. We saw him get caught cleanly against Diego Lopez, and now he's fighting a striker who's better than both of them. He's a better wrestler than both of them. He's going to be able to defend some of these takedowns, not all of them. He's still going to get taken down. But I believe that Arnold Allen is going to be able to work back up to his feet like we talked about earlier in the week. Evloev doesn't do a good job of keeping guys down on the mat once he gets them there, and he's going to have the crowd on his side. So if this does go the distance, I think that his big moments are going to sway the judges. So give me Arnold Allen to win this fight. I think he's going to do it by knockout. I saw something that said GSP thinks he's going to do it in the 3rd round. I agree, Mr. SP. GP. So the final value play that will cover one of my favorite plays on the slate. We'll look at some other people as we start building the lineups and going through, but Arnold Allen is the last guy that is really going to be able to make it into my player pool, at least at a high enough exposure. Now we can actually get into building some of these lineups using some of the value plays that we talked about. But before we do, if you are interested in supporting the channel the best way possible and getting some tools that are going to be able to help you build better lineups, place better bets, then you can consider going to kunathmma.com, looking at the plans and seeing what fits your situation best. There are two plans that we're offering in 2024. We have a lineup optimizer only, and that is something that if you play DFS, you just want the lineup optimizer so you can keep up with the rest of the competition, because lineup optimizers are going to be used by more than half of the people you're competing against. That's just $5.99. So when I talk, and you heard me say this a moment ago in value plays, when I'm saying things like exposures and targeting this fight or player pool, these are things that you can do and make and build with your lineup optimizer, which is right here on the site. Now, if you want to go a step further and you want the official betting article, you want the DFS strategy guide, you want the lineup optimizer, the data model, access to the community forum as well, that will be in the total access package that you see here on the right hand side. That'll be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. If you have questions about that, you can send me something on Twitter in my DMs. I'll be able to answer them for you, but that'll be linked all below. But now let's build some cash game lineups. So these are for your 50-50s, your head-to-heads, your double-ups. These are great ways to protect your bankroll when you're allocating some of your bankroll to tournaments. It's a great way for you to build up your bankroll as well by doubling your money if you're building lineups the right way. And I'll just give you like a quick maybe strategy or breakdown that you can use moving forward if you're, say, a smaller bankroll player. And I'll challenge you on this. If this works for you, let me know. We'll shout you out. We'll work something out. But take $20 and compete in these contests. Now do the $1 double ups up until you've spent all the $20. Now what I recommend is running the same lineup through all 20 entries, even if it's in the same contest or different contests. But what's going to happen is if you build your lineups the right way, and if the punches land and the kicks land the way they need to, then you're going to turn your 20 into 40. Then at that point, what I'd recommend is doing the same thing with the 40. Allocate all 40 into the contest, run the same lineup through an entire contest or multiple contests, and if the punches and the kicks and the knees and the headbutts that won't get called or just called warnings, at that point with your $80, you could take 40 of it and just wait. At that point, if you have 80, do the same thing again with the 40 and then hold on to the other 40. You don't need to put the entire bankroll on every event. You don't need to do that. This way you have 40 in play that can turn into another 80, and you also have 40 that you put away, and all you did was start with 20 and you just got things right twice. And you don't need to be perfect when you're building your cash game lineups. That's the benefit of this. You just need to try to capture as much scoring floor as you can, and I'm going to show you how to do that on this slate right here. We have 5 round fights, and you're probably going to have 2 losers in your lineup. So what you could do if you wanted is stack both the main event and the co-main event. So let's see what that would look like. Let's say we grabbed Bueno Silva, we grabbed Strickland, we grabbed Dricus du Plessis, we come down here, we grab Raquel Pennington. This leaves 8,800 salary left over per fighter. I have a problem with this. In cash games, you want to have 4 winners. That's what we're striving for more than anything. But when you have 5 winners, that all but locks up the win for you to show up in the top half of your contest. So when you do something like this, the likelihood of you getting 4 winners starts to go up, but the likelihood of you getting 5 winners starts to go way down. And by way down, I mean down to 0. It becomes impossible because you're going to have 2 losers out of these fights. So this is not something that I would recommend. Salary wise, the way that DraftKings sets up the salaries is that both fights are going to add up to the same amount. So if you want to do, say, Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, you'll notice that you have this much salary left over. And just to prove it to you, if you come back here, grab Mayra Bueno Silva, and then you come here and you got Raquel Pennington, you have the same amount of salary left over. Interchangeable, in my opinion. I do think that the main event is going to be more likely stacked, and I think there's more finishing upside for Dricus du Plessis over Strickland than there is for Mayra Bueno Silva over Raquel Pennington. So I say that to say this: stack the co-main event. So we're here, we've got our co-main event stacked. So now what we are going to want to do is punt somebody who's very low price, somebody who's likely going to go the distance or at least get that 3 rounds worth of extension, and that's going to be at a lower price point than what we're used to. At this point, I think that Sean Woodson makes a case for one of the stronger punts on the entire slate. This is going to be a fight that is primarily fought on the feet, if not exclusively fought on the feet. This is probably going to go the distance. He has huge advantages in height and reach and is going to be able to get his offense going. Charles Jourdain is very hittable. We even saw him score 55 points in a loss against Gillian. We saw him score 32 points in a draw against Saldana not too long ago. So there's strong punt potential here for Sean Woodson. I'm going to put him in at 7,200. That leaves us with 8,866 left over. over per fighter. If I were building this lineup, I'm probably going to put Sean Strickland in there because now with the 9,200, I can get really creative. I can grab somebody like, say, Brad Katona, and then I can grab Mike Malott. I'm happy with this. Left 300 salary on the table, but I have a winner, I have a guaranteed winner here, and I just need either Woodson or Strickland to come through for me. You don't have to do exactly this. This is a framework. You could put this lineup in. I don't care. But you don't have to. This is just showing you the idea of how you should be going about building these lineups. So do something similar, make some adjustments in your lineups, and if it works out for you and you get the 20 bucks in, you get the extra 20 bucks out, now you have 40 bucks going into the next UFC event, let me know in the comments. With that out of the way, we can build some tournament lineups, but before we do, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works. But anyway, enough of that. Let's build some lineups. So again, a starting point is probably going to be grabbing somebody who you think is going to win in the main event, the co-main event, or not who you think is going to win, but who has the upside. Give me Strickland, give me Raquel Pennington. So we've got the favorite and we've got the dog, 85.50 left over per fighter. I'm going to keep looking at some of these dogs. Before I do though, I'm going to grab one side of the Flick Gordon matchup because I think it's super important. So you got Malcolm Gordon there at 8,300, 86.33 left over per fighter. Let's say I want to grab Sam Patterson at this point. I've got 90.50 per fighter left over. Let's say I grab Sidey at 8,900, who I don't think is going to pull tons of ownership. And then I grab Robertson up here, who's definitely not going to pull a lot of ownership when you could pay just 200 more for Mike Malott. Gillian Robertson's got some finishes, man. You look 106 with a finish, 96 with a finish, 117 with a finish. Let's keep going. 94 with a decision win, 92 with a third round stoppage, 110 with a finish, 106 with a finish, 97 with a finish, 98 with a finish. Gillian Robertson is a finisher through and through. We've seen Viana taken down, we've seen her submitted in the UFC, and I think that Gillian Robertson is just a nightmarish matchup for her, so I don't mind this at all. I think you need the winner here, you need the winner here, you need Malcolm Gordon or Jimmy Flick. Sam Patterson's got that finishing upside, and then we're playing a leverage game with these last two spots with Serhiy and Gillian Robertson. Now let's say you have this lineup, but you're building multiple lineups. Let's say you are in the mini max where you're doing 150 lineups, or let's say you're a big bankroll player and you're playing 150 lineups in the big contest. That's cool too. If you don't have a lineup optimizer, which will probably do this for you as you're generating the lineups, then you can come right here, take out Malcolm Gordon, plug in Jimmy Flick at 7,900. Great. Another thing you could do is take out Sean Strickland. You could play Dricus Plessis, left 700 salary on the table. I'm fine with it. If this is your lineup right now, you might want to take out Sam Patterson and go grab Johan Lainez. You've left 100 salary on the table. Let's take Lainez out. Let's put Sam Patterson back in, take out Gillian Roberts. Come up here, Robertson, come up here, grab proper Mike Malott. You left 500 salary on the table. I don't mind it. Out of Mike Malott, Robertson, Jourdain to a lesser extent for me, but Serhiy is somebody who I like really a lot this week. These are kind of the upper echelon that I'm looking at. Now, one fight that you're probably wondering about is the fight with Jasmine Jasudavicius and Priscilla Cachoeira, or Priscilla Cash as an underdog, let's be real. A lot of people don't like when you pick somebody who's all the way down here. A lot of people just think that they're automatically going to lose because they're down here. We have on the channel picked someone that is at the lowest salary point and they've won. It's not impossible. Is it uncommon? Yes. But is it impossible? No. So you've got Priscilla Cachoeira down here at 6,700, making everything in your lineups possible for you. The biggest puncher in the division by far. Somebody who's got heart for days, somebody who can go out there, get a knockout win for you. 6,700 makes everything else possible. So let's use her in a lineup. Let's come up here to Arnold Allen as well at 7,500. Now I'm going to grab somebody like Sean Strickland. I'm going to grab my Raquel Pennington. I've got 10K left over per fighter. I'm going Mike Malott, I'm going Robertson. I left 1,600 salary on the table and I'm fine with it. You know, let's say I take Priscilla Cachoeira out. I have 8,300 left over. So that's when I'm grabbing Flick or I'm grabbing Gordon or something like that. But when you think of the scoring upside, you think of that first round upside, Priscilla Cachoeira is up there in terms of just that scoring index, if you could conceptualize that. Let's say you took Arnold Allen out. If I had to make one adjustment to this lineup more than anything, it probably would be Arnold Allen. That leaves me with 9,100 left over. I'd come right up here to Serhiy. Or I would take him out and I would attack that fight with Jimmy Flick and Malcolm Gordon. I'm fine with that too. You've left 1,100 salary on the table. That's cool. And that's cool because nobody else is going to do it. And you'll notice as you're building these lineups, if you have Sean Strickland in your lineup, you can always pivot to Dricus du Plessis because he's cheaper. Also, and not for nothing, I like Arnold Allen, but again, one of the best things that you can do is challenge the way that you're thinking when it comes to building your lineups and play somebody who you might not like, somebody who you don't think is necessarily going to win. Getting Movsar Evloev at 8,700 is a super discount. Look at his last 4 fights. He's been priced at 9,400 3 times and 9,200 once. And when he was at 9,200 was when he put up his best DraftKings score. Look at the output. Look at the takedowns. Look at the control time. And look at the scores. 120, 130, 138, 92. You remove this 92 in his last 3 fights being probably the most expensive fighter on the slate on each of them, or close to it in this fight where he was 9,200. Movsar Evloev has shown up in the optimal lineup each time. So if you wanted to go here, I don't mind it at all. And the way that we would build the rest of this lineup out would probably be similar to what you've seen so far. So I'm going to show you now what I think a lot of people would do in this situation. Not me, not probably you, but the way that a lot of people would approach this. I think people are dying to put Chris Curtis in their lineup. I don't love it at all, really. Like Chris Curtis in a decision win, like against Rodolfo Vieira, not even 80 DraftKings points, but people love the action, man. Let's say they put Chris Curtis there. And I'm a Chris Curtis guy myself as well. I like Chris Curtis a lot more than I like, say, Marc-Andre Barriault just as a fan, but I'm not going to pick him to win just because I like him. They're probably going to come here and grab Dricus du Plessis because, again, we do project Dricus du Plessis to come in at slightly higher ownership than Sean Strickland. I think they're going to pass on the co-main event. I think largely people are going to not play either Bueno Silva or Pennington in their lineups, especially if they already have the main event in their lineup. This leaves us with 82.66 left over per fighter. I could see Garrett Armfield getting some steam this week when it just seems like you have no other place to go. You're going to grab somebody like Garrett Armfield. I don't think Sean Woodson, Viana, I don't think Magny or Priscilla Cachoeira is going to pull all that much ownership. You've got 8,700 left over. So let's say somebody went with Johan Lainez. Now you've got 9,000. They'll come up here to Charles Jourdain, spend all the salary, and they'll be happy with this. Could this lineup get there? Absolutely. It's not something I'd recommend playing because you're not leaving any salary on the table. So the likelihood of you getting duped starts to go up quite a bit. And by duped, if you don't know, I mean duplicated. Somebody having the same lineup as you. And if one person has the same lineup as you and you're playing these bigger contests, that means that another person and another person and another person. That's why sometimes these big contests that are paying out 100, 200, 500,000 a first end up only paying about 13,000 to a bunch of other people. And there have actually been times in the past where the optimal lineup was not the winning lineup, despite tighter player pools in MMA DFS. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to tell you a quick story that you've heard this before if you've watched the channel, and if you haven't and you're about to hear this, this might change the way that you look at MMA DFS forever. I don't remember exactly what the card was. I'm almost certain Jamal Hill was fighting on it though. And you go back and you look at who won. It was a bunch of people. And when I say who won, I mean the big contest with the biggest prize. The number one was chopped so many ways, like it normally is. The interesting part, however, was that the optimal lineup was not the winning lineup, which is rarer in a tighter pool. Like if you play like NFL DFS or something like that, the winning lineup in the biggest contest is hardly ever the optimal lineup. But that's because you have so many positions to choose from, so many more combinations you can make. There's a lot of combinations that you can make in MMA DFS, but with the way our psychology is around betting lines, around pricing, around recency bias, it's hard for us to imagine a ton of combinations because a lot of combinations might mean that you're leaving a lot of salary on the table. For most of you, if I asked you to build a lineup right in front of me, you probably wouldn't leave any more than 300-400 salary on the table. And oftentimes that's going to get there. Favorites dominate, that's going to get there. But the point that I'm making is this. The fight card that I'm referencing in particular, which again, I don't know exactly which one it was, but I'm almost certain that Jamal Hill was fighting on it. When I looked back, the optimal lineup, which was not the winning lineup in all these contests, had left like 2,400 salary on the table because a bunch of underdogs won and they got finishes. You don't need to be a slave to this number right here. I mean, this is a number that most people in America are a slave to anyway. You don't need to be a slave to this number. You can get creative with your lineups. That's part of the fun of DFS, is that you can do whatever you want. So let's just look at it for example. Let's say Jimmy Flick gets it done. Let's say Sean Strickland gets it done. Raquel Pennington with 5 rounds to work. I have 87.66 left over per fighter, but I think Priscilla Cachoeira comes up with a first round knockout. I think Arnold Allen ends up knocking out Movsar Evloev. So now we've got 12,100 salary on the table. We can come all the way up here to Mike Malott. You've left 2,800 salary here. You have finishing upside, 5 rounds of work, 5 rounds of work, knockout upside and crazy leverage, knockout upside, and obviously finishing upside right here. And let's say you didn't go with Arnold Allen. Let's say you came here with somebody who has a better matchup. You grab Sam Patterson. You left 2,500 salary on the table. Not many people are going to do this. You take Priscilla Cachoeira out and you still come here to Arnold Allen. 1,700 salary left on the table, finishing upside, 5 rounds to work, finishing upside, and then you've got Arnold Allen, who you hope can get it done, and hope he gets it done early. If he puts up that performance like he did against Dan Hooker, where he landed 50 strikes, 49 of them were considered significant, which is crazy. You don't see that often, and especially not in men's MMA, and then you have fantasy points of 110. It's possible. It's on the table. Not to mention, he doesn't even get credited with a knockdown in that fight. So Arnold Allen's got the access to that ceiling. So just think about when you're building your lineups. Try to get a little creative. Try to get a little different. But that's going to do it for final picks. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, share this with somebody you know who's going to be watching the fights this week, and I wish you the best of luck.